6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it's not for being my well-being, but for any being on the planet to be in need just shouldn't be. The laws of equilibrium dictate that the political economy will not equilibrate till the wages in Africa are at par with the wages here. Hi, my name is Paul Duchesne, and welcome to Mama Paul's video podcast. We're going to do a slightly different show today because events around the world have been slightly different, you may have noticed. I'm going to open up with a little bit of a poem. I'm going to read a little portion of a poem by Joseph Brodsky, who is a Russian emigre, and the name of the poem is, appropriately, Slave, Come to My Service. Slave, come to my service. Yes, my master, yes. Quick, fetch my chariot, hitch up the horses. I'll drive to the palace. Drive to the palace, my master, drive to the palace. The king will be pleased to see you. He'll be benevolent to you. No, slave, I won't go to the palace. Don't, my master, don't go to the palace. The king will send you on a faraway expedition down the unknown road through hostile mountains. Day and night he will make your experience pain and hardship. Slave, come to my service. Yes, my master, yes. Well, the poem goes on for about 11, 12 different stanzas, and the interesting thing is what happens is the slave is continuously being told one thing, and he's all enthusiastic to do it, and the next minute he's told just the opposite thing, and he enthusiastically embraces that. So the slave is always being told one thing or another. He enthusiastically embraces whatever the master wants, because that's what a slave does. He's a slave to the master. Well, this seems sort of appropriate to say the least, but Brodsky himself, he's a Russian emigre, and he, being a really true poet, he was true to his word and true to his lifestyle, and he wound up spending 18 months of hard labor in a Russian concentration camp, at which point he was kicked out of the country. If you want to read more about Joseph Brodsky, a lot of his stuff is available. He came to America in '72, and he was the Pulitzer Prize, Nobel Prize winning. Nobel Prize in 1987, and he was the Poet Laureate of America for 1991 and 1992. Now, the poem seems appropriate to me because, well, the Black Lives Matter movement is seriously linked to the history of slavery, and in the last few weeks, I've become uncomfortably aware of reading Adam Smith, who I will get into another night, another afternoon. I've been having almost a state of depression after reading some stuff from Adam Smith that I never knew was there before. Anyway, I've been writing a piece, and it's called Whitey Whitey, an Angry Old White Guy. And in the piece, I'm making a connection between my early childhood and my father's bar and the Stonewall riot and the Black Lives Matter movement. I can draw a sort of straight line with a lot of little segues in between. And coincidentally, today is June 19th. It's my birthday. My birthday, June 19th, and it's Juneteenth. And interestingly, an old grammar school buddy called this morning from back east. He called this morning at an early time here in California, and he was on the phone, and I had to get the phone. I jumped out of bed, and I answered the phone, and he called to wish me a happy birthday like he does every year. And, well, it was sort of interesting because, whoops, whoa, hello? Yeah. Is this Dick Gregory? No, I'm sorry. I was expecting a call from Dick Gregory. When we talked last week, he was going to, he was going to call in. It's not. Well, who is this? Bill O'Reilly. We'll talk about the antithesis of Dick Gregory. Bill O'Reilly, what are you calling about? I was just talking about my friend who called this morning, and no, it's a funny thing because your name came up. What do you mean you know? I haven't even submitted the article yet. How do you know what your algorithm is bigger than my algorithm? Are you kidding me? You saw your name and you wanted. Hey, stop yelling. Did you hear me? I said, stop yelling. This is my show. They can't hear what you're saying. They absolutely can't hear a word you're saying. This is my show. It's my half of the conversation. That's all you're getting. If you don't stop yelling, I'm not going to listen to this. I'm just going to hang right up on you. This is, what do you think, you're on your show? You can just yell at people? I'm telling you, you either tone it down right now or I'm getting off the phone. Okay, that's a little better. Okay. All right. I'll let you hang with it for a bit. Okay, listen. Let me refresh the story to bring everybody else up to date of how we got to, how we got to where we are with you. Listen, I was a cocktail lounge kid growing up in the 50s and hanging out in my father's bar. So we're paying off the cops and the mob. And the cops had so much chutzpah, they listed each name and rank and the amount of money that they were getting on the payoff. So my father, I used to see these little sheets. So my father says to me one night, he says, hey, you got a friend. What's his last name? Is it O'Reilly? And I said, no. It's Riley. No, there's no O. He said, is he a cop? I said, no, he's not a cop. I said, oh, okay. Right, no, he's not a cop. I said, he's a really nice guy. He's not a cop, and his name isn't O'Reilly. He says, well, I got this O'Reilly, my father says. He says, I got this O'Reilly on the cheat sheet. And I thought maybe it was your friend. I said, no way. Well, I remember this really clearly because of my friend's name and everything. And here you are, umpteen years later, and there you are, Bill O'Reilly, on television. You're about my age, a few years younger. I'm 44. You're what, 1949? You're about 70. And I'm wondering, you're from Brooklyn. I was from Queens. Your father was a cop in Manhattan. My father was a bar owner in Manhattan, paying off the cops, and about the same period of time. And I'm wondering if it's your dad's name. It's on my father's payoff sheet for my dad's bar. No, I don't know for sure. Well, I didn't see the first name, no, and I don't remember the first name, but it sure is pretty close. And as our orange-headed gangster president likes to say, could be, might not be. I don't know. Somebody might have told me. I might have heard it, So what do you say? You're not going to confirm or deny it? Well, what are you kidding? Anything you say could be incriminating? What do you want, Law and Order here or something? Listen, I'll tell you what. Let's just leave it right there, okay? Clear as mud. It's clear as mud, okay? It's funny, you've been like popping up here and there. About 2 months ago when this whole pandemic thing started, and remember Fox News, there's no pandemic, there's no virus, blah, 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 right? Well, you and Hannity, you're coming across this. I saw the pictures, right? You're coming across 6th Avenue. You're going into the Fox anti-news news network, right? The pandemic was real. And even you guys are joking about how, I know Rachel Maddow, she was reporting about the people in the homes, in the nursing homes and the old folks' homes, right? And you guys are joking about thinning out the herd, and who cares about all these bunch of old people? What, are you kidding? I bet you didn't know that you were being recorded. Oh, well, you were. I saw it. Well, it wasn't in the front page of the New York Times, that's for sure. They're actually they're more conservative than a lot of people like to give them credit for. Listen, I'm in better shape than you are. There's no doubt about it. And I've got early onset terminal rigor mortis, for Christ's sake. You must be like getting eligible to be a Soylent Green candidate any day now. One other thing. You didn't think that was funny, huh? Well, maybe not Soylent Green, maybe Soylent Gray. How about Soylent Gray? Hey, the other thing that happened, what was it, Jon Stewart? I think it was just last week, and he said that he was sort of, the crew there, they didn't like that he was, you guys were so friendly together. Yeah, and he was always sort of pretty nice to you, and he had you on the show quite a bit. Yeah, I remember that. You were on a number of times. In fact, I probably saw more of you on Jon Stewart. Well, I wouldn't watch your show. I saw you a couple of times, and you were just, you weren't fun to watch. Anyway, his staff was really upset that you were on so much. He was sort of embarrassed that maybe he let you on so much. They were even talking about scrubbing. That means getting rid of, yeah. getting rid of some of the tapes that you were on. But I'll tell you one thing. Listen, I think it's better to talk to you. I really do. Honest to God. In spite of who you are, it doesn't matter. I will talk to almost anybody. If you'll listen, I'll talk. And especially somebody like you, I'll treat you, you treat me, I'll treat you, what are you going to do? I tell you what, okay, that's enough of this. Maybe in your next life you'll come back as a better person. That could possibly be. Maybe not, maybe so. In either case, I'm going to hang up right now. Arrivederci, and I hope we don't talk again for a while. I really do. I'm not... Okay, goodbye now. Bye. Okay, Bill O'Reilly. It's sort of funny that he came up. I'm writing this, like I said earlier, I'm writing this story, and it's the title I've got on is Whitey Whitey, an angry old white guy. Well, I'm looking at the Huffington Post the other day, and you get to the very bottom of the page when they got like a dozen of these little clips, and there's these two guys, and they're in front of a sign for Stonewall. I didn't make a full-size graphic of this, but I downloaded this. These two guys, and they've got a little duo. They make music, Greg and Brendan, and they've got this whole little song about the Stonewall riot. And they've shown all these pictures about it. Well, I've been writing and talking about the Stonewall riot for years when I realized what was going on there. And I saw, my God, the synchronicity. These guys are making a connection between the Stonewall riot and the Black Lives Matter. And I was making a connection between the Stonewall riot, my father's bar preceding that, and the Black Lives Matter movement. So what I'd like to do on this show is sort of give my version of the whole Stonewall thing, but I'm going to start it off, I'm going to precede it just by giving a little bit of a background of how I come out of my father's bar, this cocktail lounge kid story that I've got. Okay, so we're going to just do that for a minute here. So my father's a bartender, and he's worked in this bar for quite a few years, and his dream is to buy the bar and own the bar. He wants to own the bar. He's always, as he comes home from night, he frequently refers to himself as a slave. The word slave comes up quite a bit. So I've heard this as a kid growing up. And if you look at today's essential workers, you're basically in the same category also, where you're just barely making enough money to keep yourself afloat. You can maybe, feed yourself and pay the rent if you're lucky, But you're always on the edge, and you got to serve somebody. So you wind up in many cases feeling like you're a slave, if not a slave to the system. So anyway, he's a bartender in the bar, and he wants to buy the bar from Crimmins. So one day, this Irish bookkeeper, he's a bookkeeper at a bowling alley in Hoboken, New Jersey. Now, Hoboken, New Jersey should have been the giveaway right off the bat, Sinatra's hometown. Anyway, he shows up, and he just happens to have just enough money to supply the other 50% that my father needs to buy the bar. My father got half the money. This guy shows up. He's got the other half. I mean, how he knew how much he needed, this all remains to be seen. So they go into a partnership, 50-50. My father will be the working stiff. Joe will be the bookkeeper. So they buy the bar, and they open up, and it's the Southmore Cafe. And there's the opening picture. And you take a look at the picture. That's me, the little guy there, and that's my father on my left, which might be your right, and my left, that's my father, and the other one is Joe and his wife, May Barrett. Well, it turns out, Joe, the bookkeeper from Hoboken, he's connected, as they say, which means he's connected to the mob. So the day my father signs the paper, he finds out he's in bed with the mob. Holy mackerel. So the local gangsters immediately start hanging out in the bar. And they're there during the day, and they take a booth in the back, which is right across from the public telephone. They still had public telephones. And this was also when they were taking bets. So the bookie was taking bets all day long on mostly on horse races, but on anything. They would take a bet on any game. This was before the lottery. The lottery is another story that I think has seeped in a little bit of corruption there. It happened first, I believe, in New York, where in order to get the approval to have the lottery happen, they're going to give 5% to the education fund. Well, they took 5% out of the education fund before they gave 5% to the education fund. So the education fund wound up right where they were to start with, and the mob wound up 5% in their pocket, which is why you don't see bookies there anymore in the street. They became more legitimate, as has been well documented in many Hollywood movies, including the classic Casino, the movie Casino. So anyway, I would go to the bar on Sundays, and I'd see these guys. They'd come in about noon. So I'd go in there with my father, my day with my father, and I'd sweep the bar and clean up, and I'd go to the theater next door, and I'd check things out. And about noon, these guys would come in. They were always 200 pounds, you know. They were right out of what you would see as the Sopranos nowadays, literally typecast. And they'd be packing here, and the big guy, you know, they squeeze into the booth, you know, they always had to squeeze in, you know, they couldn't, they were all overweight, and they sort of squeeze out of the booth to get up and take the phone call, take the bets. Well, as I said, so I'd leave, they'd come in at noon, and my father had asked me to leave about that time, so I'd leave about 12, 1 o'clock, and I'd walk by myself, 10, 11, 12 years old, by myself. I'd leave Central Park South, I'd walk down 7th Avenue and Broadway through Times Square, stop off at the Metropole and watch Gene Krupa warming up, and I'd take the train home. You know, you could walk around, you could be safe, It's still a time to be safe. Well, in the bar itself, in addition to the activities that were going on, my uncle was Albert Anastasia's barber. Now, Albert Anastasia is the head of the mob, the Gambino family. And this segues later on another show. I'm going to do a story. We're going to connect Trump with the Gambinos and the Gallo brothers and see what's going on there. But anyway, Albert Anastasia, head of the mob, and he gets whacked in the barber chair in the Park Sheridan, 1957. If you ever seen the opening of the movie Analyze This, they show pictures of the outside of the bar and the cops and everything there. So the day before the shoot, they come up to Arthur and they tell him, hey, go get a ticket for the 3rd race at Belmont tomorrow. He comes back to my father, he says, Ernie, I don't know what's up, but they came in, they told me to get a ticket for the 3rd race, I'm going to the track tomorrow. That's when they whacked him during the 3rd race. Now, in spite of what you may have seen in Scorsese's movie, The Irishman, it didn't exactly happen where these two guys walked out with little pistols and came out from down below. No. And the barbershop didn't have a mirror, a glass window facing outside. No. Neither of those things were true. They walk in the front. They get out of the car. They walk in the front door, carrying Tommy guns right back to the barbershop. In the barbershop, their barber steps back. They put their own guy in. He steps back. Boom, 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 boom. They spray the place so badly. It was all this Italian marble. They just ripped the shreds out of the place. I mean, 1,000,000 bullets went down. Anastasia's laying there dead in a pool of blood. And did we get a picture of it? Let me see if I got a picture of him. I might have a picture. Yeah, there he is. Let me get the picture up. And there he is. There he's laying in a pool of blood in the barber chair. Off the barber chair. He's not in the barber chair. He got shot out of the barber chair. It took them over a year to rebuild the barbershop after this. I mean, that's how bad it was. It was remarkable. So anyway, I'm in the middle of this whole thing. I'm in the middle of, as this kid, I'm watching the cops, the mob, and what I later called the Carnegie Hall culture of corruption. Because you would see all of these people sort of sitting together at Carnegie Hall, which was 2 blocks away also. Additionally, the New York Athletic Club was right across the street, and every team in the New York City area, the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Giants and the Knicks and the Rangers, you know, all the teams, they were all automatic members and had free membership at the New York Athletic Club. The bar is across the street, so many of them used to come into the bar. In fact, at one point I had a baseball signed by Mantle, Maris, Berra, the whole dream team. Well, these guys would come in, they'd hang out a little bit in the afternoon, and the Goombas, the gangsters, they would threaten these guys to shave points. And they'd threaten to break their legs. Not kill them, they'd threaten to break their legs. or break their fingers or break something on their body. They wanted the point shaved. They wanted the point spread. So if there was a possibility that a bet was going to be put on any kind of an event, they wanted to be able to place the bet. They wanted to win the bet, and they wanted to know what the point spread was going to be. That was going to be. So they didn't have to lose the game. They just had to watch the point spread. That was the whole key to the whole thing. If you didn't cooperate, like I said, they broke your legs. Now, in addition to this, we were paying off the cops and the mob, and it was usually within $25 of each other. There was like an obvious price fixing was going on over here. The bill would come in, it would be between, say, $300 and $350, and the slip of paper would come in the same week. The cops and the mob would both bring in the slip of paper within the same week. And it happened 4 times a year. So every 3 months, the cops would come in and they'd have their list with everybody's name and everything. And the mob would come in with just the bottom line, $350. And if you didn't pay them off, the mob would come in and break your legs. If you didn't pay the cops off, they'd send an inspector in and they'd shut the place down because, you know, your ice machine was looking crooked or something like that. After 5 years of this going on, the Irish bookkeeper sort of suddenly disappears. Well, turns out the feds show up and the federal taxes haven't been paid for 5 years. So Dad owes the feds more money than the bar is worth, and he sure doesn't have it. Well, the mob, who's all over the place by now, they come in and they make him an offer he can't refuse. They tell him they're going to pay off the feds after he signs the papers, gives them the bar. So he signs the papers, gives them the bar, bada bing. They never pay off the taxes, and he gets hounded to his dying day, which isn't too far after this, by the feds. The real hooker to this whole story is the day after they buy the bar, they turn the bar into a gay bar. Now, my father's absolutely blown out. He can't believe it. It's a gay bar? Uptown Manhattan? What's going on? He has no idea. Well, years later, I stumble onto the flyer, which I just put up on the side of the screen here. I'll put it on full screen for a second here. Let me put it on full screen. Okay, so there's the flyer, and it says, "Get the mafia and the cops out of the New York City gay bars." This is the document that gets published that very day after the riot. It's out on the street, hundreds of copies of this printed. That's when we used to have paper and you printed things. So this thing is all printed, it's up, and it's all around the city within hours after the riot. And I did quite a bit of investigating into this whole topic to figure out what was going on. Now, there's various movies that have been made. I think PBS made a movie about this. There's various books out. There's all sorts of articles out. You can do your research yourself. In fact, that very article that I was showing you, that was an original copy of it that I have. You can't find the original copy too much anymore. But if you just Google that, you will get a facsimile of it. Actually, anyway, so you can get a facsimile of the copy. So I found this whole thing, remarkable, and it sort of, for me, it definitely has been a strong point motivating a lot of the activity that's happened in my life right now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the Stonewall story, and this is my version of what happened, or the ramifications around Stonewall. Like I said, there's a lot of different versions. And I'll throw up a few pictures. In fact, why don't we get rid of that, and why don't we bring up the bar itself? We'll bring up the bar. Where's the bar? Here we go. Here's the bar. It's outside. So Stonewall is. Let's see. Can we see it here? Let's put it right in the big screen there for a second. Okay, there's Stonewall, and it's in Sheridan Square, which is it's in Greenwich Village, and it's an interesting location because 6th Avenue is close by, and it's sort of like the spokes on a wheel. There's a park in the middle, there's spokes on a wheel with a lot of little blocks coming into it, which is sort of interesting as the night goes on. what happens over there. So Stonewall happens that fateful night in June 27th, 1969, which is going to be just about a week from now. And that's what made this also sort of interesting, Juneteenth, the Stonewall riot. And that night, nobody really expected there to be a riot. It was just sort of a typical pay off the cops kind of a night with a slight irregularity to it, much like a typical killing of a black man in the country here, with a slight irregularity to it when George Floyd was killed. The slight irregularity being that they actually got a videotape of them dry lynching a man for over 8 excruciatingly torturous minutes while this... Anyway, you all know the story. Similar kind of little twist to the evening happened at Stonewall that night. So the cops come in for the payoff. Now, the cops usually didn't come in on a Friday night. They usually came in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, when it wasn't too crowded. Now, the purpose of them coming in for the payoff, they would come in with their blue suits on, with blue outfit, blue and blue. And the whole point was to intimidate the whole crowd. Not just the people in that bar, but to let the whole, everybody in the community know that they were out, they were collecting, and this is what you did. Well, they come in on a Friday night. Every gay bar in Manhattan, downtown, uptown, didn't matter where they were. They paid the cops off, and they were all paying the mob off. Now, there's a bull dyke, and she was I had her as a black bull dyke. I didn't know she was black. I had her as a bull dyke, was in the back room. Now, most of the bar is mostly guys, and there's just a few women in the place. It turns out it was a black trans woman, and we can get rid of that picture. I think I might even have we might have a picture of her here. I think we do. Let me see. Get rid of that. Let me see if we can get this picture up of her. There she is. That's her. Okay. So this is her. And I believe her name is Marsha Johnson. And she is the heroine of the story here. Marsha Johnson is the heroine of the story. She and her girlfriend jumped up, and they were sick and tired of it. They saw it coming, and they were sick and tired of it. And they, as the cops came in, and all they wanted to do was hang out and have a drink and be with their friends, and they were getting sick and tired of paying off the cops and have the cops intimidated and everything. So they jumped up and they said, listen, we're sick and tired of this, and we're just not going to take it anymore. I'm paraphrasing. And the money collecting cops who had come in, they were from the exact same precinct down the block. So the Stonewall was in their precinct. Now, usually it didn't happen like that. Usually the uptown cops came in from a different precinct and did the collections on, like I said, the off nights. Well, these guys, it was like a turf war going on with the cops. And they didn't like that the other cops were coming in taking money which maybe they should have been getting. They also didn't understand the logic of coming in on a Friday night versus coming in later on in the week. So what happens is she jumps up, the whole place starts into a riot, and the cops wound up barricading themselves in the bathroom. They can't get out the front door. There's a front of the place, there's a back room. They wind up in the bathroom. They can't get out of the bathroom. There's bars on the bathroom. They can't get out of the front of the place. So they start calling down to the precinct, tell them for help, send a paddy wagon. Let's get this thing over with. Well, the cops at the other end of the phone, they're going to punish these guys because they didn't play by the rules. These guys didn't play. They went against the rules of the other cops, and they didn't play by the turf wars, and they were going to collect their own money. So these guys are all PO'd at them. So they let them stew. We're going to let these guys stew there for a while. So these guys are stewing for like over an hour or so. Well, meanwhile, everybody else in the street hears about what's going on, and the street is starting to get really filled with lots of people, and there's more and more people coming out into the street. Before you know it, there's literally a riot going on in the street, in the bar. Meanwhile, there's this little old Italian guy who's used to playing bocce ball at a bocce ball court in the middle of the afternoon in Greenwich Village. Well, he's sitting somewhere in the corner of Stonewall bar wishing he was home. What the hell am I doing here? Every gay bar in the village and uptown had a little old Italian guy with a cheap fedora hat sitting somewhere in the corner watching out for the interest of the mob. Because the cops and the mob were in this together. And that's the crucial thing that the trans gal who jumps up and started this thing, they didn't realize the connection with the mob. They thought they were just fighting the cops. And that's the reason that I'm bringing this story up. The general story is that the cops are in the wrong, the cops are this, the cops are that. The cops ain't in this by themselves. There's a much bigger thing going on here. In this particular case, the Alcohol Beverage and Control, ABC, they're in every state. The ABC passed had a rule. You couldn't have a gay person in a bar, or you could shut the bar down for immoral activity. Now, it wasn't against the law to be gay in New York. It was against the rule to be gay in a bar in New York. They'd shut the bar down. That's why the mob owned every bar. In cahoots with the ABC, in cahoots with the cops, they passed this law. They had this little rule. Therefore, where did the gay people go? And a gay person couldn't own the bar, so the mob owned the bar. The barkeep is basically a patsy front man who's collecting the money and passing it over to the cops and the mob. So there's a whole front going on here. It didn't matter if you had a three-piece Brooks Brothers suit with a $200 Dior tie, or you were a flaming swishy faggot with a limp wrist. Didn't matter. You were a gay person, they could shut the bar down. So we got the ABC, the NYPD, and the Sicilian mob. This is New York, it's Sicilian mob, not San Francisco with the Tuscany mob. We have this collaboration going on. Everybody's getting a little piece of the action at the expense of this persecuted, reviled minority. Sounds familiar? It sounds, sure does sound familiar. By noon that very day, by noon of that exact same day, the New York City Homophile Youth Movement, that's who signed that little paper I had up there a minute ago, with the help of the Village Voice, which was right down the block, at the end of the block of the Stonewall, they published this classic flyer that said, "Get the mafia and the cops out of the city bar, out of the New York City bars." At the time, the Village Voice was still a real newspaper. And this was before the commercialization of the news, which leads us to where we are today with Fox so-called news, basically the Fox in the hen house, and local news stations all around the country and papers being fed a continuous stream of sanitized and rightly approved excerpts of news. The Village Voice ultimately became a national advertising rag and died a slow death about 2 years ago. I think it was 2018, I think it finally went out of business. Stonewall opened that very night. Now, there was all sorts of, let's get rid of these guys and bring up a, what do we got? Maybe we can find a machine that they cracked up in the place. Yeah, there's a little piece of the cigarette machine and the, probably the jukebox over there also. Stonewall opened that very night. The place was wrecked. The streets were wrecked. There was glass all over the street. Real big mess going on. The cleanup fixer crew came in, and they had the place rebuilt. They're not going to miss a night's work, these guys. They restocked with their untaxed, watered-down booze, and they filled up the new cigarette machine with their untaxed cigarettes. Now, every week, a truck used to come up from Virginia with untaxed illegal cigarettes. They would distribute most of them to the bars, and the excess, they would always park the truck right in the back of Grand Central Station on 45th Street and Vanderbilt Avenue. I used to work in the Pan Am building. You'd get out of work on a Friday night, you could go down there, and you could get your cigarettes. I kid you not. So, everybody who was anybody was in on the fix and was getting a little piece of the action. And that's what we call trickle-down economics in the Carnegie Hall culture of corruption. Well, Stonewall opened, but the anger wasn't quelled at all. A conglomeration of what's been called anti-Vietnam, pro-black, pro-women, pro-hippie, anti-capitalist left-wing politics, or the entire counterculture of the late 60s, they met 1 month later on July 24th and formed the Gay Liberation Front. They started meeting and talking and organizing, and by the end of the year, this little unknown homophilic group turned into the first Gay Liberation Day parade, and every year since, there's been a gay pride parade in almost every country on the planet. Even those closeted Republican gays, like Roy Cohn, they used to let Roy Cohn, who was the gayest gangster, the most corrupt lawyer in American history, was also gay. He's the guy that you see memorialized in Angels in America. He's the one that's dying of AIDS in Angels in America. Anyway, he used to hang out with our orange-headed corporate president, Don DDT, Donald the Don Trump DDT, and Cohen was supposedly in the closet, but everybody in the Studio 54 knew big enough that there was a big enough crack in that closet that maybe Groy didn't know he was gay, but everybody else knew he was gay. And Donald and him were hanging out, the best of buddies, for 8 years. That's who introduced, this is a whole other story, another night, this is who introduced, it was Cohen that introduced Trump to the Italian mob in Manhattan, not in Queens. Well, most of young Donald's relationships with women was either for show, or, well, a yellow river may sort of tell it all. But his relationship with Roy may have started, who knows, but there's arm-in-arm pictures of these two guys together. I don't know. I'm just saying, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. Maybe I heard it from somebody, maybe I didn't. All right, that's the end of Stonewall. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. The end of Slave, Slave, Come to My Service, and we'll wrap the show up. Ooh, we ran a few minutes over. Slave, slave, come to my service, yes, my master, yes. If all this is so, then what is good? To have your neck broken and my neck broken, to be thrown into a river, that's what's good. Who is so tall as to reach the heavens? Who so broad as to embrace plains and mountains? If that's so, I should kill you, slave. I'd rather you go before me. And does my master believe that he can survive for 3 days without me? Joseph Brodsky. Peace, patience, persistence. Hopefully we'll see you next week.